Me name be Ralph Nader. Me gonna make an appeal. Homies, save the rainforest. I keep it real.
Ralph Nader is perhaps one of the most interesting figures in recent history. Meeting every task with a dead face and a no-nonsense attitude, from the outside, it may be hard for some to pinpoint exactly what's so special about him. Nader has a long list of credentials including author, environmentalist, lawyer, politician, and most importantly, consumer advocate. As a consumer advocate, Nader's main concerns are protecting the welfare of the people and exposing the wrongdoings of America's corporations. This is only a piece of Nader's ideology, though. Generally, his activism and role in history can be broken down into three distinct parts. It is said that Nader had a sense of social justice instilled in him at an early age. Nader first got his start in activism, though, through publishing an article while attending Harvard Law School. The article was titled American Cars, Designed for Death, a topic that would lead to something much bigger.
Tonight, Ralph Nader charges the Detroit car companies with running risks that can't hurt them, but do hurt us.
Nader would later publish his first book, Unsafe at Any Speed. The book provided an explanation of how cars of the time did not have proper safety features and were therefore dangerous for consumer use.
In 4 years to find out. This is my point. Either it's sheer callousness or indifference, or they don't bother to find out how their cars behave.
Nader's book would eventually lead to the passing of the National Traffic and Motor Vehicle Safety Act, a law that would require motorists to wear seatbelts while also requiring automotive companies to implement more safety features in their cars. Nader's efforts didn't stop at automobile reform, though. In 1967, he also led a campaign that influenced the passing of the Wholesome Meat Act of the same year.
That's what really gets them all worried. One can imagine what would happen if people could see what goes into their processed food products, or they could see what frauds so many of the so-called cleaners and cleaning agents are, and the kind of harm that's involved.
In the coming years, Nader would go on to establish Public Citizen Inc., a non-profit advocacy group whose purpose is to fight for consumer rights. Since its inception, the group has been successful in achieving many of its initiatives. Nader's environmental policies even still seem to be more rooted in humanitarianism rather than actual conservation. For example, Nader strongly rejects the use of nuclear energy due to the possibility of a fallout.
I don't like to play Russian roulette with the American people. You just need one bad accident, and you'll have a huge area of America uninhabitable.
Nader believed his concerns about the environment were pressing, so much so to the point where he was influential in establishing the Environmental Protection Agency, along with the Clean Air and Water Acts of the early 1970s. In line with the aforementioned Clean Water Act is the following rant by Nader, in which he argues the harmful effects of oil spills.
The laws are very weak. The penalties are even weaker. Picture the scene. You can destroy a body of water like Lake Erie, and nothing happens to any of the polluters. You can destroy a beautiful spot on the west coast called the Santa Barbara offshore area, and there hasn't been any criminal prosecution or fine of the violators. There was recently a $1 million fine imposed on Chevron for the biggest oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. What is that? That's nothing. That's about an hour's gross revenue of the parent company. And it can be just passed on through the cartel in the form of higher consumer prices. Unless these fines go to the culpable officials, you're not going to get law acting as deterrents to future activity. And an oil spill is not just something that messes up beaches or kills a few seagulls. An oil spill, as we now know, due to testimony before the Senate a few weeks ago, breaks down almost immediately into carcinogenic components. which are consumed by fish and which can be passed through the food cycle. The oil spill also destroys almost every vestige of life on the seabed over an enormous area. And so it's a very serious ecological disaster, and one that does not repair itself in just a few months or even a few years.
Believing that consumers were not being well represented by either candidate, Nader decided to run for president in 1996 as a member of the Green Party. Despite amassing only 0.71% of the popular vote, Nader decided to run again in the following election year. Losing again, the best idea he could come up with was to run twice more, now as an independent. Some unfamiliar with the situation may wonder why Nader approached the presidency with such persistency, an answer to which he gave before announcing his candidacy in 2008.
Will you run for president as an independent in 2008?
Let me put it in context to make it a little more palatable to people who have closed minds. 24% of the American people are satisfied with the state of the country, according to Gallup. That's about the lowest ranking ever. 61% think both major parties are failing, and according to Frank Lutz's poll, a Republican, 80% will consider voting for an independent this year.
If any of these elections are of note, though, it would be the election in 2000. Although Nader was never a serious contender in this election, his slight left-wing policies split the vote between himself and Democratic nominee Al Gore, in what was already a close race between Gore and Bush.
Al Gore winning the popular vote, but you got 2.7%, nearly 3 million votes in 2000. Then Florida. As you remember, George Bush won Florida by 537 votes. You got 97,488. Democrat after Democrat says, to this day, Ralph Nader, if your name had not been on that ballot, Al Gore would have carried Florida. Exit polls show he would have carried Nader voters 2-1. Gore would have been president and not George Bush.
This is a tale you're too young to remember. It began in 2000, the month of November. Young voters don't know about Bush versus Gore, but trust me, this has all happened before. His name was Ralph Nader. He spoke for the trees. He put seatbelts in cars to prevent shattered knees. He led the Green Party. His speeches were soaring, and he took votes from Gore. My God, Gore was boring.
Despite now being considered a nuisance among Washington officials, Nader's political activism did not stop after losing in 2008. Till this day, Nader continues to be active in politics, debating topics such as minimum wage and healthcare, while also continuing lobbying efforts for the increased rights of consumers.